everyone, and I hope you're all having a good day so far. I'd just like to point out, before I start this review, you're probably all aware that Britain's most beloved actor, Terry Jones, had just died recently 5 days ago, on January 21st, 2020. You're probably all familiar with him on his work of Monty Python. But the reason I'm starting this review is because not many reviewers have done a review on this movie before, which was written, directed, and produced by Terry Jones himself. And I'm going to be talking about The Wind in the Willows, based on a novel of the same name by a famous Scottish writer, author, Kenneth Grahame. Now, I'm sure that you're all familiar with The Wind in the Willows for many adaptations, like Disney's The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, released in 1949, that won a Golden Globe Award for the Best Color Cinematography, and the stop motion animated film in 1983, which later made a series based on that movie. In this version I'm going to be talking about was the one done by Terry Jones, and this movie was released in 1996 in the UK, and it was later released in the US in 1997. The year I was born after the film's first release in the UK, and before the film's release in the US in 1997. In the US, the title was changed by Disney to Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, based on their theme park ride in both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. But the ride in Walt Disney World was later canceled and replaced by the Winnie the Pooh ride. So, I'll be talking about the plot of the movie, my thoughts on the movie, and my rating for it in the end. So it all starts with Mole, played by Steve Coogan, doing some spring cleaning at his home, but his home gets disturbed by what's going on in the meadow, so he left his home in a hurry, leaves the meadow, and stumbles across a river where he meets the good-hearted water rat played by Eric Idle. The rat takes Mole to Toad Hall, where they meet Mr. Toad, played by Terry Jones himself. And Toad explains that he stole his meadow to the weasels for cash for a gypsy caravan cart. And when they were on the big open road, they got interrupted by a fast, speedy motor car, and that's when Toad's mania for motor cars began. And he starts his crazy, wild, reckless stunts the next day, causing his friends to bounce out of the car into the wild wood, and eventually crashes into a tree in the wild wood. When Mole was alone in the dark woods, the wild wood, he stumbled across a chief weasel played by Anthony Sher, and along with the other weasels, and they explained to Mole that they were going to build a big whatever that Mole didn't understand what it was in the meadow, and also turning Toad Hall into a weasel-only area. Rat reunites with Mole, and they both got reunited with Mr. Badger, played by Nicole Williamson, in Badger's home. And meanwhile, Mr. Toad was lost in the woods and stumbled across the weasels, who made an offer for 6 new motor cars for the next morning at Toad Hall. mole, rat, and badger explain the mole, rat, the mole and rat explain to Mr. Badger about what's going on with Toad, of how he sold the meadow to the weasels where Mole lives, and that his new mate and has a new mate here for motor cars. Toad eventually meets up with them, and they all try to confront Toad for his reckless, mischievous actions, and also try to make him see sense, to tell him to change his ways. But Toad was being so difficult to his friends and refuses to listen and to admit for his ways. So they decide to put him in a basket and take him to Toad Hall, where they discovered 6 new motor cars, but Badger ordered the 6 motor cars to leave, and the weasels decided to put a detour sign to make Toad not forget about motor cars, and it's when Toad decides to play driving motor car in this room. But then one day he fakes ill to Rat and began talking about the riverbank so much that Rat starts to have passion for his activities at his home on the riverbank and leaves Toad alone in a room. However, what he doesn't realize is that Toad escapes from Toad Hall and visits the pub, and the weasels put up a road closed sign next to the pub where the motor car stopped, and the driver and the passengers got out to join the pub, and Toad eventually steals it due to his control from his mania, and eventually crashed it. He was sent to the trial where the prosecutor, played by John Cleese, who was not being so much helpful to Toad and to his friends because he criticized Toad's behaviors and all that, to the judge, played by Stephen Fry. The Badger tries to explain about Toad, but Toad keeps interrupting, which causes Badger to storm out of the trial. And what's worse is that the Chief Weasel disguised himself as a rabbit in the jury section and announced Toad guilty. And the trial originally sends Toad to prison for 20 years, but after when Toad insults the trial and starts hopping around trying to escape, gets captured, the judge made a final change for 100 years in the deepest, darkest prison. The Rat and Mole decide to stay on guard for Toad Hall, and the weasels eventually break in and kick them out. The Rat switched labels that are left outside by one weasel who forgot to switch them over, to replace the bomb labels and the bone supplies label. And Toad, meanwhile, who is in the prison alone and sad, gets greeted by a jailer's daughter, played by Julia Sawalha, who explains to Toad about Toad Hall being blown up soon, and she helps Toad by inviting her aunt, who was a tea lady, to dress Toad up as a tea lady. I just like to make a quick mention that in the book, Toad dressed him up Toad was dressed up as a washing woman, and in this adaptation, he was dressed up as a tea lady. The Rat and Mole eventually dig a tunnel under the prison, but Toad decides to escape the prison all by himself, and he then gets hauled up by a guard who escapes from the guard, but then causes like his tea tray to fall downstairs, and that's when all the guards realized that it was Mr. Toad trying to escape. So they tried to charge at him, but Toad eventually escapes from them and gets reunited with Rat and Bull. They hurried over to the train station where they then saw a train coming into the station, which was, the train in that movie was Southeastern and Chatham Railway number 592, built in 1902. And it was still used today on the Bluebell Railway. So the engine arrives into the station where they met a kind driver played by Bernard Hill, who offers for them to give a free ride on his engine. So when they were on the engine, they realized that it was the policemen and the guards on the passenger coach ordering the driver to stop the train. But Toad then convinces the truth to the driver, who they are, and that they escaped from prison because Toad Hall was going to blow up. The driver agrees to help them by throwing coal at the policemen, but the driver eventually gets slipped out of the train, and Toad then takes control of the engine, causing 592 to go faster and faster to 120 miles per hour. And then Mole tries to help with Rat, but he accidentally uncouples the carriage coaches, causing them to split apart, leaving Rat and Mole behind, and then Toad far distance. Eventually, Toad derails the engine and tries to hurry over to Toad Hall, but gets captured along the way by the Weasels. Meanwhile, Mole, feeling guilty for himself and how careless that he has been, decides to leave Rat alone back to his home. And Rat tries to find Mr. Badger, and they both reunite. They both decide to help Toad and save Toad Hall. But Toad, Rat, and Mole were eventually being taken over to the factory where the Weasels were planning to kill them by turning them into dog foods. And Mole, meanwhile, who is alone and depressed, discovers that the factory on the big meadow that the Weasels told him was a dog food factory, which they've opened up in order to make more money. So Mole decides to help his friends out by trying to rescue them, and he stopped the stop button, and then Toad accidentally pushes another button, who is like so curious and sort of like getting lost easily, which causes all of them to almost get shredded again. But Mole eventually catches a hammer, a wrench, worried that he couldn't throw for Toffee since that little incident of trying to throw a coal to the policeman. But when he throws the wrench to the stop button, he finally managed to stop the button with his good throw. And that's when they all soon barge into Toad Hall to kick all the Weasels out of Toad Hall. The Chief Weasel tries to blow up Toad Hall, and Toad tries to stop the Weasel. But when the Chief Weasel did blew up, and Toad, distressed and so unhappy with himself that he lost his friends and Toad Hall. But it turns out that when when Rat and Mole and Badger and Toad Hall were saved and were not blowed up. And they discovered that thanks to Rat's idea for confusing the weasels with the labels, which the bombs ended up being put to the dog food factory, causing dog food to explode and causing the Chief Weasel himself to blow up himself. The next day, they all celebrated a special ceremony for saving Toad Hall, and then his friends Rat and Mole and Badger tried to tell Joe not to do any songs, speeches, or that stuff because it's always about Mr. Toad. But in the ceremony, Toad decides to let his friends do their own songs to celebrate for the victory of bringing Toad Hall back. And then when Toad hurries back to Toad Hall, he then discovers a biplane which his mayor causes him to start take interest for biplanes now. So Toad drives a biplane over the riverbankers and his friends and starts doing fun wild stunts, where the end credits roll until Toad flies away into the sunset onto the big ocean. And that is the end of it. My thoughts. I think it was an enjoyable, fun, entertaining movie. The script is well written. I do enjoy the songs that are in the film. And even though that most of the parts were not fully taken from the original source material, but it's still fun and entertaining. My problems, well, it would have to be the fact that some of the actors that are trying to be like animals were not believable enough. Take Toad for example. They did a very well job making Terry Jones look like an actual toad by making him green, and that scene where Mr. Toad spotted a dragonfly and used his tongue to capture a dragonfly. That just convinced me to believe that he is Toad. But for others, for the rat, they did at least put whiskers and a tail, but I figured they could have just put some more fur on Eric Idle's face to make him look like an actual rat, and probably give him big ears, big rat ears. And as for Mole, they should have make a snout, a mole snout to make Steve more like an actual mole. And same for Badger. They should have fixed some more details for Nicole. And same for the Chief Weasel. These were my little problems. If they could have at least maybe do some more detailing, as I've mentioned, or possibly make it a CGI looking, then it would probably be good and it would look believable. But that's just my little problem, and I honestly do not mind about it, but I wish they could have. My rating for this, I would have to give it I would give this, I'd say a 9 out of 10 or 8 8.9 out of 10, or it's actually a 9 out of 10 I'll give this film. My little problem, as I mentioned, and also the fact that like most of the parts were not fully based from the novel, but it's still good and enjoyable. And I would just say that, like, also, for the honor of Terry Jones, is that you probably heard of Disney Plus, and all familiar with that, since it was open last year, in 2019. So, for the honor of Terry Jones, I should think that Disney should add the Wind in the Willows onto Disney Plus, because hey, since hundreds of Muppet fans can would request Disney to add the Muppets onto Disney Plus, then I think the same should be done for Terry Jones' beloved entertaining film as well. In order to do that, there's a link that I'll leave on the description where it's called Disney Plus Help Center, where there you can request a movie or a show, and they'll hopefully that onto Disney Plus eventually. So I'd like to know your thoughts about this movie. You could comment your thoughts, and be sure to comment that you've went to Disney Plus Help Center and requested for Disney to add this movie on there for the honor of Terry Jones. Now, you could call it either The Wind in the Willows or Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, whichever titles you guys prefer. For me personally, I'm gonna have to go with the original title, The Wind in the Willows, from the UK title and the novel's title. To end this review off on a high note, I just want to say, Terry Jones, thank you for all of your entertainment you've done to audience, to your fans out there. And I also want to thank you for making this movie that I enjoyed.